Oh, happy Cinco de Mayo, Marisa. I am going to be reading chapter 1 of Mercy House for you. The background for our reading tonight is brought to you by Dan Sheedy. He has his golf. It lights up, but you can't see it. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. He has his Star Trek, guys, and we have over here Kramer, the bottom part of Kramer, and, of course, some Irish dancing shoes. We may have some visitors popping in and out. You never know, okay? So this is chapter 1, Mercy House, Elena Dillon. Apparently she's from Fairfield, Connecticut. It doesn't really say. Yeah! I'm in the library. Can I help you?
Oh, you're reading still?
Yeah. I'm doing a read aloud for one of my favorite students. Want to say hi?
Oh, hello.
What's up? How can I help you?
Wait, is this pause?
No, I'm recording.
Oh.
Spit it out. I got things to do here.
Okay, I just thought we were gonna get ice cream.
Yeah, okay. After chapter 1, there'll be an ice cream break. Okay? All right, I'm going to go on to chapter 1. Alrighty, thank you very much. Oh, will you get me one more Bud Light from that refrigerator? Just put it up here. Thanks so much. Okay, so this is January 2010. This is, wow. I was not engaged or married, nor was I a mother at this time. Thank you. Okay. Sister Evelyn knew she was on call that night. It was her turn to answer any knocks or rings after midnight. And so when she heard the first tentative rap at the door, she groaned and pried one eyelid open, just enough to read the red numbers glaring from the digital clock on her bedside table. 2:43 a.m., an ungodly hour. Evelyn burrowed deeper into her pillow. She'd answer the door. She would, after 30 more seconds of sweet rest. Oh, I do love a good nap. The second strike was more assertive. "Get your lazy bones out of bed, Evie," Sister Josephine cried from the neighboring room. "This is your calling, after all." This is how nuns talk to each other in the middle of the night. Evelyn struggled up onto an elbow. "If you're awake enough to be clever, you're awake enough to answer the door yourself." She was satisfied with that response and waited 20, then 40 seconds for Josephine to stir. When her housemaid ignored her, Evelyn sighed, pushed herself upright, and began the painful process of extricating herself from bed. Ever since Evelyn entered the convent 50 years ago and was required to rise with the sun, that was right when we were born, she worshipped sleep like it was a false god. Me too. But now that Evelyn was 69, the physical difficulty of making her way from her cot to the ground was a relatively recent development. Her body had thickened. Mine too. Her bones had become brittle. I'm drinking my calcium, I'll be okay. And her joints were stiff and reluctant to bend. Every inch of her skeleton creaked when used, but gouty arthritis precipitated the worst of it. The condition swelled her toe, tightening her ankle, and sent a burning ache through her knee. The slightest movement was a reminder of her nearly decade-long status as a senior citizen. Gouty arthritis. Have you ever met a man with the gout? Oh, I have the gout. Oh, the gout. Please. Certainly, when God created man, he knew human life expectancy would eventually extend. Couldn't he have designed the aging process to be just a bit more graceful? Even a half-century after her formation period, Evelyn could still hear the response from her first Mother Superior. "Who are you, young novice, to question the will of Almighty God?" That's how a Mother Superior talks. Hobbling around in the darkness of her bedroom, Evelyn muttered, "Forgive me, Lord. I am but your meek and humble servant. But you, Mother Superior, you can kiss my fat Irish ass." Evelyn tucked an arm through the sleeve of her ratty bathrobe and winced as she laced the terry cloth around her other shoulder. As she slipped her puffy feet into moccasins whose insoles retained her impressions, her bladder stung with fullness. Oh, God, man, getting up in the middle of the night and you gotta go to the bathroom. She had to pee. She always had to pee. She shuffled toward the bathroom just as another thump on the front door echoed up the stairs. Oh, for crying out loud. She'd have to delay relieving herself, which was just as well. It meant she wouldn't capture a peek in the mirror of the disheveled face she was presenting to this newcomer. Much like mine, I'm presenting my disheveled face to you, Marissa. Because of her matronly shape and dowdy gray hair, one of her former residents said she looked like Flora, Sleeping Beauty's fairy godmother. If Flora had been fired, lost her wand, and was forced to live on the water. Ha, that's funny. I've never seen Sleeping Beauty, but I bet that's funny. With that in mind, Evelyn braced the thick wooden banister and descended the Mercy House staircase step by careful step. Mercy House was a safe haven for victims of domestic violence, founded and operated by Sister Evelyn, oh, that's her, Sister Josephine, the cranky lady next door, and Sister Maria. Haven't met her yet. Nuns of the Orders of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Mercy. Different than Our Ladies of Mercy of Sister Madeline, Sister Pat, Sister Peggy, Sister Dorothy, who's our principal. I didn't like her. She is a different kind of nun. When my sisters were at Laurelton, they had a sister named Sister Cafeteria. Isn't that cute? She must have worked in the cafeteria. Anyway, their 5-bedroom, 100-year-old row house in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn was almost always at capacity. As Evelyn said, good for business, bad for humanity. Indeed. In the entryway, Evelyn pressed the security code into the system's keypad, 0416. April 16th, you might think? No. It was for Hebrews, chapter 4, line 16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Beautiful. Maria had chosen the verse because it contained two of her favorite words, grace and mercy. Evelyn had voted for 2836, numbers on the keypad that corresponded with Adam, as in, let me Adam, because revenge was often her sinful impulse when she saw the battered woman who arrived at their door. I could imagine. The other sisters didn't think this instinct should be condoned, and her suggestion was vetoed. When Evelyn pulled the door open, she found a girl whose skin was tan, even in winter, and whose black walnut hair was rigid with gel and coiled in miniature ringlets over her shoulders. Thick charcoal liner, smudged from crying, rimmed her eyelids. They don't want to give the race away. They won't just say that she's whatever she is. Dominican, Puerto Rican. I don't think she's black. She's just tan. I don't know. What do you think, Marissa? Well, her face acted as a history of her relationship with her assailant. That's a great word, because domestic partner, all of that. This is an assailant's terrible situation. And Evelyn's experienced eye, she was trained as a nurse in the convent and practiced medicine for many years, surveyed the girl's injuries. A fresh red welt circled from her cheekbone to her forehead, like a swollen parenthesis left open. To what, Evelyn didn't know. A scab, an older wound, ran vertically down her bottom lip like dried blood stitches, and her nose took a sudden detour in its center, a trademark break from a previous run-in. No matter how many times Evelyn saw such marks of violence, they still made her stomach turn. Beneath the bruising, there was softness to the girl's face that suggested her features were still developing. Oh, she's young. God had not yet finished her carving. Based on this and her still budding form, Evelyn guessed her age to be about 16. Right about when I met you, Marissa. Oh my God. Well, no, 14, 15. Sorry for knocking so much. I didn't know if you heard me. The words rushed from her mouth as though she were afraid she'd been followed and wanted to explain herself and get out of sight as quickly as possible. The girl squeezed her full, cracked lips together and then released them. I heard this was a place for, you know. Her stare darted from Evelyn to the uncertain night at her back. She faced Evelyn again and shrugged. Her eyes welled with fresh tears. Do you have room or what? Sister Evelyn had been doing this long enough to know she wouldn't sleep again for hours. Maybe not until the following night. Maybe not even then. She swallowed, opened the door fully, and gestured down the hallway. There's always room for one more. That's mercy, Marisa, right? Always room for one more. Have mercy on these souls. Evelyn twisted the cap off the rusty tea kettle and flipped on the sink faucet. You know, New York City water, if they're in New York City, which Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, they have good water. You don't need to, filter it or like we do Poland Spring here in Long Island because I don't trust the water. But New York City water is really good. So you can just flip on the sink faucet when you're making your tea. She ignored the girl while the kettle filled, allowing her time to settle into her new surroundings and some privacy to apply the ice pack Evelyn had nonchalantly deposited onto the table. She'd also set out the ham and Swiss that had been sitting in the fridge. She made a sandwich every evening before bed, just in case a resident, current or newly arriving, needed a snack in the middle of the night. One sandwich? Evelyn loosed an unencumbered yawn without bothering to cover her mouth. Like that, I guess. I don't know. The burner clicked 3 times before the flame caught. It never took long for Evelyn to become endeared to each of their residents. Well, to most, anyway. But when they first arrived, she had to remind herself, although this was just an ordinary day for her, just another interrupted night's sleep, just another stranger at her door, it was probably one of the worst nights of their lives. The girl sat hunched at the table with the ice pack pressed against the left side of her face. Her eyes cast about the kitchen as if something were about to jump out at her, but she didn't know from where. Rage swam through Evelyn's veins and poisoned her heart. Let me at him. What's your name, dear? She asked. The girl straightened, as if startled to remember she was not alone in that room. Her name's Lucia. So, Lucia. What should we go with? Let's be consistent. Lucia. It's probably Lucia. I don't know. I'm going to go with Lucia, I guess. Evelyn reached into the cabinet and brought down 2 chipped mugs. I know all my mugs at my house are chipped, too. I need new mugs. One read in chunky hot pink letters, Best sister ever. Get it? She's a nun. That's funny. You gave that gift to Janine, right? Yeah, I know. I gave the same gift to Jane and Anne. A gift from a former resident of the house. The other read, What would Jesus brew? Another clever one. Evelyn couldn't remember the origins of the second wear, but it was her favorite. She reached back into the cabinet for tea bags, but then hesitated over the selection. Black, green, or chamomile. This girl didn't seem the green tea type. And who really liked chamomile? Then again, judge not and all that crap, right? Black, Evelyn asked. I know they really do have a lot of tea flavors, don't they? It gets confusing. Although I've just started drinking mint tea on the evenings where I'm not drinking red wine or Bud Light, which is rare. So, yeah, she's deciding on the tea. Black, Evelyn asked. Puerto Rican, Lucia said. The misunderstanding took a moment to register. I meant your choice of tea, dear. Oh, right. Her chin dipped, embarrassed. Yeah, black, whatever. Evelyn dropped a Lipton bag into each mug. Lucia is a fine name. Saint Lucia is one of only 8 women named in Canon of the Mass. She was a virgin martyr. Interesting. Lucia snorted. Yeah, well, I ain't no virgin. She was too young to make that remark so offhandedly. Oh, true. And frustration and sympathy for this girl bloomed anew. In all probability, her sexual experience was not voluntary. Evelyn wished she could detect in her traces of her young age more naivete, more curiosity, more innocence, more joy. Virginity is about the only requirement for sainting a woman. Men need to have accomplished something, but women, they just need to have kept their legs crossed. Otherwise, you're guilty of bewitching a good man into sin, Evelyn said. The kettle hissed and she extinguished the flame. But from my experience, the whole virginity thing is overrated. Coming from a nun, oh my god. Her stare casually drifted over to Lucia's, and she was satisfied to find raised eyebrows, startling newcomers out of their funk was one of her routines. With Evelyn's coarse silver haircut bluntly across her forehead and her lined expression permanently set in a scowl, nobody expected the gruff nun to have a sense of humor, especially not a cross one. Evelyn's lips pitched up into a grin to emphasize the gag, and then fell almost immediately. She is at once the joker and the straight man. Kind of like how I feel right now. Lucia's eyebrows pulled from surprise to suspicion. An acrylic fingernail wandered up to her lip. She propped it between her teeth. COVID-19, no nails are getting done. Or my eyebrows, they're kind of a mess too. So how does this work? From years of cooking, cleaning, carrying, and carrying, Evelyn's hands were so thick and callous, she thumbed the metal cap from the tea kettle spout without an oven mitt. Boiled water cascaded into the mugs. What do you mean? Evelyn asked. She pinched the paper tags and bobbed the tea bags until they were saturated with water and began to seep sepia. I mean, what do you do here? What do you do for someone like me? Well, what do you want us to do? Evelyn asked. Lucia worked her lips together and then shrugged. Her eyes began to water, and she blinked her lids quickly to pat the tears down. Do you need medical attention? Evelyn glanced up at Lucia, again assessing the damage to her face and wondering what hurt might be lurking beneath her clothing. Lucia shook her head. Evelyn knew not to press this early. She spooned sugar into each cup. Do you want to pray together? Lucia again indicated no. Girls very rarely responded to that suggestion from the onset. Prayer was too hokey, or perhaps too intimate. Prayer was something they agreed to only when they were ready, and often never at all. Evelyn pulled open the refrigerator, heaved out the jug of milk, and plunked a drop into each mug. The milk swirled independently in the tea and then blended, a foreign body assimilating. Do you want to talk about why you're here? Evelyn asked, and Lucia stared into her lap. Her chin jutted to the side. Evelyn stirred the cups, knowing that the ceremony of tea, the boiling, brewing, mixing, and heat of the ceramic between her hands would be a comfort all its own. I do like a nice cup of tea. She gripped the handles and shuffled toward the table. Her knee cried out with each step, and her square body rocked atop her limp. She placed one mug before Lucia, who appeared grateful for something on which to focus her attention. Then she dragged a chair out, clamped her teeth, braced herself, and lowered her body into the seat. She exhaled a groan and closed her eyes against a sear up her right leg. God, this nun is falling apart, dude. Yikes. Maybe yoga. Somebody said we should do yoga. It might help with your sore joints and stuff. A resident had once offered her marijuana. Oh, see, or that's an option. I said yoga. A resident had once offered her marijuana to treat the pain, but that was a slippery slope, and Evelyn knew from experience she had trouble maintaining her footing. Oh, interesting. Evelyn might have a past. Look forward to hearing about that. All right. You all right? Lucia asked in a tone that was more comment on how Evelyn was, so obvious. Not all right. Just another Tuesday morning. Evelyn swallowed and then reopened her eyes. Want some advice? Don't get old. Good one, she said, only afterward realizing from that angry lump that would last for weeks, Lucia was already well acquainted with pain. Oh. Lucia's finger skimmed the edge of the plastic plate that held her sandwich. She didn't meet Evelyn's eyes when she asked, You got potato chips? Evelyn straightened. Hunger was a good sign, a very good sign. I have pretzels. Would you like some pretzels? She shook her head. I put chips in sandwiches. I like the crunch. Oh my God, me too. Whenever I have a ham sandwich, I have ham, little mustard, and potato chips, Ruffles, just like two. You gotta get the big ones out of the bag. Ruffles only, and then put them on the sandwich. Oh, they're such a good crunch. Well, I hope this doesn't affect our Yelp review, Evelyn said. She's funny. But she made a mental note to pick up some potato chips from the corner bodega later in the morning. Aw. She sensed that this girl, like so many, was in need of simple, healthy love, the kind without agenda or ulterior motive, and she prayed the girl would find it there. That is a good stopping point. But I think I'm on a roll, and I'm only a couple of more pages to the end of chapter 1, so I'm gonna forge ahead just after I have a whole step. Okay. Oh, when Evelyn was 4 years old, we're going to hear a little bit about Evelyn. When Evelyn was 4 years old, she was bartered into the sisterhood by her father. Jeez. A scrawny Irishman who lived on a diet of sausage, eggs, and whiskey. He promised God if his oldest son returned safely from the invasion of Normandy, he'd commit his youngest daughter, little Evie, to his eternal service. The name Evelyn came from the Irish Aileen, Siobhan, Evelyn, I think it's Aileen, meaning wished for, longed for child. Aibhli fada N. Is that, I don't know, how would you say that? Anyway, when Sean returned in one piece without even a hairline fracture, except inside his mind, her daddy said, "Little Evie, look what you did. Look what wishes you keep making come true." Oh, lucky girl. Evie, who worshipped her gregarious daddy, accepted her fate. Lucky for her, she loved everything about being a Catholic. As a child, instead of having tea parties, she practiced serving communion to her dolls. Since she always knew she'd become a nun, she viewed her family's house of worship as a home. The nuns, who glided around the halls of her church and school like a robe-swishing, rosary-clanging army, were aware of her pact with God, and when they were allowed to speak, discussed her future in whens, not ifs. God, that's got to be awful. Priests were paternal figures, so much so that when she had a more serious sin to confess, like stealing bubble gum, she walked an extra mile to a different parish so none of her priests would recognize her voice. Tricky. Remember when we go to confession with Father Doherty? I went like once, maybe twice. But he would just bring us in as a group, and he'd be like, "Okay, girls, have you been good? No? Are you sorry? Yes? All right." Off we went. Oh, that was the best. That was easy. Anyway, she liked the ceremony of her religion. I do too. And felt secure in the predictability and order of the Mass as well as in the familiar words of the liturgy. She appreciated the solemnity with which the priests lifted a chalice from the altar, the way they whispered the Eucharistic prayer as if murmuring directly into God's ear, and the elegance of the thick gold stole draped around their necks. Evelyn felt she belonged in church, often more than she felt she belonged in her own house, where all her siblings were over a decade her senior and treated her like the spare sibling who was leaving, and her parents frequently forgot they still had one last daughter to raise. I told you I'm number 6 of 7. Yeah. Okay. But then there were times when she watched her high school English teacher, Sister Angelica, gaze out the classroom window mournfully, as if trying to recapture a precious memory that slipped away. And in those rare moments, she wondered if the fate awaiting her was a happy one. If there were better lives to live, like the ones her high school peers prepared for by taking training courses and dressing for dates at the drive-in or sock hop. But boys never took an interest in Evie. She suspected it was because she wasn't very pretty, with her bristly auburn hair and wide, flat nose. Her biggest insecurity was her neck. It didn't elongate and was barely thinner than her face. Oh my God. I think I have Evie's neck now. I didn't have this when I was younger, but I do have it now. She wished it were more delicate, as a woman should be, but instead it was as sturdy as a redwood. Maybe it was the best she had a groom in Jesus. Cute. If the Dodgers could leave Brooklyn, she supposed she could too. So she entered the Hudson Valley Convent when she was 19 in 1960 at the tail end of Vatican I, when the sisters still abided by the Code of Canon Law, 2,000 restrictive regulations to keep nuns reverent, including no newspapers, magazines, radio, or television. Letters were censored and not delivered during Advent or Lent. No personal belongings or spending money. Oh my God, that's outrageous. Female visitors only once a month and none during Advent or Lent. Daily silence, except for 45 minutes of conversation allowed after both lunch and dinner, with total silence on Sundays, and clothing limited to the habit, a head-to-toe wool uniform marked with her assigned number. Jeez, 106. That was only washed, 4 times a year. Ugh. Maintain custody of your eyes, meaning don't let your stare linger anywhere for too long. No chewing gum or swinging of the arms. No razors or sweets. No congregating in groups of fewer than 3 to prevent intimacy. No tampons. Did they have them back then? Or eating bananas, because both were suggestive. Jeez. No classical music by Claude Debussy. I don't know him. It could be Debussy. I don't know. It's definitely Claude. D-E, capital D-E, small B-U-S-S-Y, because it was too racy classical music. That's awesome. Inside the convent, the women knew little of the cultural and social evolution occurring outside their walls. Evolution. Beatlemania, Space Needle, West Side Story, Marilyn Monroe, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam War, Spider-Man, Bob Dylan, Muhammad Ali, LSD, the Civil Rights Movement, and the first breast implants. To them, the 1960s didn't look very different from the 1860s. Interesting. Although the convent was a short hour-and-a-half drive from Brooklyn, Evie wasn't allowed to visit home, and she rarely heard from her family. She felt used up and spit out, like she'd satisfied her role, paid her debt to God on their behalf, and now they had no use for her. That kind of stinks. Suddenly, her Irish name, Aileen, longed for child. Longed for child. Okay, so that's what Aileen means. Seemed cruel in its irony. Aha, now I understand. I'm going to read that sentence again. Suddenly, her Irish name, Aileen, which means longed for child, seemed cruel in its irony. In her more melodramatic moments, she likened herself to Jesus on the crucifix, abandoned by his Father. She stared at the single photo she was allowed to keep of her family and asked, "Why have you forsaken me?" There were dark days. Once, when Mother Superior caught Evelyn sneaking a scrap of turkey before dinner, she made Evelyn lie down in the doorway so all the other nuns had to step over her on their way into the kitchen. Some days were darker still. I used to sneak down and have Captain Crunch in the middle of the night. Not in the middle of the night, but 10 o'clock before bed. I was afraid it was going to be there in the morning. If my brothers got up before me, they'd eat it all. Oh my God, it was so good, right? In fact, one of the few times she laughed in those first few years was when one of the older sisters stood too close to a prayer candle and her veil caught fire, while the smoldering sister and several other nuns flailed about, slapping the side of her head, trying to swat out the flame. The priest, Father Stevens, continued with his service as if they weren't squawking like a brood of hens at the back of the room. Evelyn wouldn't have survived formation had it not been for Eloise Harper. Eloise entered the order shortly after Evie. Eloise taught her to read body language when words were forbidden, to hear God in the silence. Eloise taught her to want to be a nun, not just because of her father's promise, but because the vocation suited her and made her better. She began to find comfort in the communion of sisters, peace in prayer, and purpose in the commitment and sacrifice. Her habit, which, with the loose white veil of the novitiate years, made her part of a higher calling, and it gave her a new family. That's nice. That's good. Her father died of liver failure before Evelyn took her vows, what she once thought of as his vows. Oh, see, she could escape. She didn't have to stay, but she chose to. See? But by the time Evelyn sheared her hair down to its fuzzy roots in order to fit into the, whatever it's called, gimp, that hugged her face and held the black veil like a crown, they were indeed her vows. Well, mostly, anyway. When Evelyn opened her eyes the next day, it took several blinks to orient herself. Hi, almost done. Oh, who's that?
Mrs. Regina.
Oh, you can tell her I'll call her back in a few minutes. She was slouched in her rocking chair in the Mercy House living room. Her olive wood rosary beads still laced through her fingers from her prayer the night before. And May Lee, a 19-year-old resident of the house, clasped Evelyn's shoulders and rubbed her hands up and down to generate warmth. You're shivering, she whispered. Having been there 6 months, May Lee was the house veteran, and so Evelyn knew her better than the other residents. We're back to, I see, the next day. So, okay. She'd learned she worked at a theater concession stand so that she could escape her reality by watching movies for free, including Twilight, 7 times. You know the author of the Twilight series? I think it's those series. Hunger Games? Is that the same thing? I don't know. But the Hunger Games lady, her husband and Terrence are really good friends. They live in Newtown. It's weird. She's like a gazillionaire, and her husband hangs around with Terrence. Anyway, including Twilight 7 times, she was almost always smiling, but was rarely happy. And although she appeared shy and compliant on the outside, her uncle had trained such a demeanor. When overwhelmed, she held her breath and didn't release it until she was on her own and could emit the exhale, along with a deluge of profanity spat in three languages, English, Russian, and Mandarin. The first time Maylee returned from one of these private outbursts, Evelyn said, "If you want to curse so only God can hear you, that's between the two of you. But there's no need to censor yourself for anybody else's sake. Don't hide your fire under a bushel." In the rocking chair, Evelyn gathered her beads into a fist and shifted, a call for a status update from her body. She was answered by severe stiffness in her back and would pay for this restless night's sleep all day long. Yoga. Or marijuana. Those were the 2 things. I suggested yoga. Somebody else suggested marijuana. I don't think she's doing either one of those if she's still so sore. You should stop giving up your bed. It isn't right, May Lee said, straightening. Her skin was pale and smooth. Her nose was set on a sturdy wide base, and her eyes danced with the complex joy of teardrops in a paisley pattern. Bring new girls into our rooms, even if it is 3 a.m. This isn't good for you, Popo. Evelyn was told the Mandarin phrase was one of the respect for an older woman, but she liked Maylee so much it could have meant trash hag, and Evelyn wouldn't have wanted her to stop using the endearment. Maylee began to leave the room, but then hesitated in the doorway. How is she, the new girl? Evelyn twisted in her chair, despite the pinch she knew the movement would trigger in her back. She loved Maylee for asking about Lucia. She loved her in the way she grew to love all of her residents, women who had been broken by men, but who put themselves back together, who asked after others despite what was stored up inside themselves. I didn't read that right. Who asked after others despite what was stored up inside themselves. Evelyn forced her voice to be tender through her pain. You remember what it was like. Chapter 2 is going to be all about May Lee, so we're going to hear her story. I don't know if it's going to be good. All right. I hope that was enough for you. I'll see you next time. Enjoy Chapter 1.